CNT120, Chapter 4, we're on to the remote access section. Remote access is really a service that allows a client to connect with and log into, could be a service or resources on a network from a different geographic location. Well, prior to COVID, this was something that, maybe some people would do. Once we had the pandemic, a lot of people were using remote access to get resources at their workplace that they would normally not have at home. So this is a lot more kind of in the front of our minds now prior to a couple years ago. Remote client can get access to files, applications, resources that would normally be at our LAN or WAN at our workplace. And this could even be, files on the server, as well as access to, phone and phone utilities and phone voicemail and that sort of thing at your service. The client hosts need a transmission path between them and any necessary software to complete that connection to do that. There's two types of remote access servers, a dedicated server or software running on a server. You could have a dedicated server, dedicated device doing this. The book gives you an example of a remote access server. Different manufacturers have them for their resources or devices. This could be an actual dedicated unit that people are connecting to, and it relays you into the network. And this handles the authentication, that sort of stuff, and then moves you in or lets you access resources in the network. The other way is literally a software or a service running on a server. And they give you some examples of different things in Windows, direct access, as well as always on VPN. These are services running on a server that give you access to. And again, that would give you access to resources inside your network. This is what a lot of places did. They enabled these services for people to access resources at their workplace. I need to be able to get my mail at work. I need to be able to get my files at my work. I need to be able to access my my phone voicemails at work, kind of thing. There's different types of remote access: remote file access, terminal emulation, and VPN. And we'll just start working through some of these. With remote file access, we can upload, download data, configuration files, etc. through things like these. First one I mentioned is FTP. This is a way to transfer files. And I think of an example with FTP of, once upon a time I was maintaining web servers, websites. I would update the files on my website through FTP. And that was even something my wife did on her website for quite a while. I would literally use an FTP client. This would send the files up to it, and the web server would just start serving up those files. The problem with FTP, though, is it's not secure. It doesn't encrypt its data. So if I were to capture any of that transmission, I might learn passwords and so forth. Especially if I wait long enough, I will learn those. So it's not secure. So enhancements have come along over time. FTP Secure over SSL, that's FTPS. This added the SSL TLS to encrypt both the control and data channels. Unfortunately, as we'll see, this is not secure. This is not compatible with your secure FTP. Those two are not compatible. So secure FTP, file transfer version of SSH. So this is really an extension of SSH. This one here, the secure file transfer protocol. This one, again, it's not backwards compatible with the other one. Turbo File Transfer Protocol, this is something we use in our networking. We will often use a Tftp server to save configuration files or load configuration files. All I need is a Tftp server running in my network, and I can take configuration files on my router and save them there, or on my switch and save them there. And I can also turn around and copy them back on. I can copy them back on to my devices to manage them. So that's that gets used for very small, like binary text file kind of things. Another type of remote access is terminal emulation. With terminal emulation, I am getting access to a resource like a router, like a switch, like a server, and and actually I have access to it like I'm sitting at the command prompt at that device, at the command line at that device. There's two different categories of. There's the command line version, and there's also the GUI version. So with terminal emulation, things like Telnet SSH, I'm going to remote in and literally have access to the command line. GUI-based ones, I would have access almost like I'm sitting at that terminal with point and click with my mouse kind of thing. So let's take a look at these real quick. Telnet, this is old school. This is old school connection to devices like routers and switches. Simple password, access to, that's it. The problem with this is clear text. This is clear text transmission of my data. So if I take, let me open my PuTTY example here, and I'm going to do a, actually let me get Wireshark going here in the background. I'm going to start a new Wireshark session. There we go. And I'm going to use PuTTY here. And I'm going to connect to my test site of telehack.com. This is my test site for Telnet. And I'm going to load a little program here called if I can type, Star Wars. I'm going to load that little program and let that program play. Actually, if you let this play for a while, it does a ASCII text version of Star Wars, the episode 4, New Hope. All right, I'll let that play in the background for a minute. I'll stop that. And I'll come over here and stop my Wireshark. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a filter in here, and I want to look at my Telnet data. And I'm going to, here's my Telnet packets here, and I'm going to come partway down, and I'm going to open my Telnet field here. Here's Ethernet header, IP header, TCP header, Telnet. I'm going to open up Telnet, and I'm going to go down through a couple of these. And if I take a look here, this is me typing the letter S. There's my there's my typo, backspace, backspace, backspace. And there's STARWARS. And then here is that first screen displaying the 20th Century Fox. The reason I'm showing this is to show you that this is all transferring clear text. This is exactly what I saw on my screen. So this is definitely a security vulnerability, because as you saw me what I was typing. And if I happen to be typing in passwords, I'm learning passwords. Okay, and this, I was just typing the command Star Wars. So that's not anything secret there. But that is why this right here this is old school. This is how we first did remote access in the routers and switches, but we don't use this anymore because it is clear text. So, and here's my PuTTY example and connecting in and so forth. Well, the modern version of doing this remote command line is through SSH. So let me go back here, and I'm going to close my, there we go, I'm going to close that out. I'll exit that out, and I'm going to, with SSH, I can remote in, but it's going to be encrypted. So I will have the same kind of access to my resource, my device, but it's going to be encrypted. So I'm going to I'm going to connect into another resource using SSH, and we'll Wireshark that session here. So let me do, we'll capture a new one here, and I'll get rid of that. I'll load my PuTTY again, and I should have my, here is my test site, my SSH test site, rebex.net. So we'll load that in, and I'm going to connect through SSH right here. I'll do open, and I think my username is demo. I think my password is password. And I'm connecting into basically a, this is a public server, so I would change the directory into the pub directory, do a listing here. Here's example. I'll do example, and I will do a listing. Here's some files that I can open, download, etc., etc. Okay, well, I'm going to exit out. I'm not going to leave that run, but I'm going to stop my Wireshark in the background, and let's look at some SSH. So I'm going to look at my secure shell, and right off the bat, here's the client protocol, key exchange. Here's my Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and boom, encrypted packets. So I could look at what I just captured here. Here it is. Here's the SSH protocol, and here's the encrypted packet. There it is, but it's encrypted, so I can't read anything that's here. This is the modern way to remotely connect into a resource like a router, switch, server, that kind of thing, to get access and work on it. With this one, I do have that security of my encrypted transfer of data. There is a Windows proprietary protocol, remote desktop protocol. This allows me to remotely connect into a Windows machine. It could be a Windows desktop, could be a Windows server, and it literally renders my screen like I would be sitting there. I just need to enable that on my device. Then I use the remote desktop connection, and I literally get a connection like I'm sitting at that device, and I could use the mouse and open menus and open utilities and work on it as if I were sitting there. If I need to connect to something that is not Windows to Windows, I can use VNC, virtual network computing. This actually is there's versions available for different operating systems. So I can load this onto a Windows machine and connect to a Linux machine and vice versa. So I have some flexibility here if I need that GUI, the graphical interface connection. So here is this is Tight VNC. These were ones we had used in the lab room once upon a time. Now, I'm leaving this in. The book did not mention this, so I'm going to mention this super quickly. I can also do management through URL, something like connecting into my router at home through the IP address, browse into it, and configure it. And this is the kind of thing you have at home. This is typically through HTTPS. This would be another way to remotely connect into something to manage it. A lot of your routers and switches that you have in a network, I can also enable this if I go in and put a setting in to say enable this access as well. I also have out-of-band management. Okay, so Telnet, SSH, Remote Desktop VNC, all those rely on existing network connection that is working. So as long as that's working, I can access it. But if I have a problem with that connection, I now need to rely on out-of-band. And out-of-band means I need another way to access it. And that is where I might actually take my laptop to a closet and plug into the console port with a console cable. I might plug into the access point with a console cable. I might plug into my router with a console cable. And this literally goes from like my laptop into this port on the device, and I can make configuration changes to it, especially if I have some kind of connection issue or issue. I might actually go to the closet where this is and plug in and work on it and bring something back online. Here shows you laptop and a connection going into that console, or you might use this adapter. This is a USB to serial port adapter. I have one of these in my laptop bag to be able to connect into routers and switches for just this purpose. That's what they call out-of-band management. Well, I might also use an even backup of that, where I might connect a modem, actual phone line modem, into the auxiliary port on my router and switch, that I could get access to this if my main connection is down and I'm not able to like drive to the closet quickly. I could have this as my backup as well. That's another out-of-band management another out-of-band management method. I wanted to leave that in there as a quick reminder of these are other ways to get access to these devices.